There are two ways of naming any API members in .NET: Pascal casing and camel casing. Camel casing is used for naming private and protected fields and for parameters. The other members are named with Pascal casing. Here you can see that the class name, public event, public property, and public method's name, they are all named using Pascal casing. Only the private backing field and the payment parameter are named via the camel casing. Of course, private methods also should be named via Pascal casing. Also, I want to add that private fields can be named using the underscore prefix. This practice cannot be considered a Hungarian notation. The underscore for private fields allows you to distinguish local variables and private fields, since there are tons of situations when they are named equally. Of course, there is a this keyword, but despite that you can rely on the underscore. This is a matter of taste to some extent. Concerning acronyms. Acronyms which consist of two letters and are not a part of a camel-cased parameter have to be uppercased. For example, the namespace system.io or the method start.io with the parameter iostream, which is camel-cased. Acronyms which are lengthier than two letters and are not a part of a camel-cased parameter have to be uppercased only at the first letter. Consider an example. The namespace system.xml. Only the first letter is uppercased. The method process_HTML tag. Only the H letter is uppercased. And the parameter HTML tag, which is camel-cased. Compound words. Now let's look at how to write down compound words in code. Generally speaking, you should delimiter words by the casing. Here are some examples. ID and OK are exceptions from the rule of two-letter acronyms, since they are not acronyms at all. They are just commonly used short versions of the identifier word, and all correct, a jokey misspelling of all correct, which was current in the US in the 1830s. Strive to avoid using of common short names such as win instead of a window, X instead of extension, and so on. The IntelliSense is powerful enough and it provides the auto-completion feature, so you don't have to type the whole word. When a parameter does not bear any semantic payload, you should name it as value or item. For example, the stream inheritors in the BCL expose the following overloaded write functions: write double value, write float value, and write short value. If you're developing a collection, then you can name a parameter in the add method as item. If you have already exposed a class, say string parser, and many clients currently use it, and you want to add a new version of that API, then you should name it as string parser2. Prefer numeric suffixes for new API versions. Of course, we're talking here about the case when you can't extend the previous version anymore for some reason. You should not roll out a new class every time you add new functionality. There is one general rule regarding names of inheritors. If this does not evoke any contradictions, then add a parent's class name as a suffix to the inheritor's name. For example, file stream inherits from stream. Customer user exception inherits from exception. Interfaces names should begin with I prefix. Some people, including Uncle Bob, think that this is a stupid agreement because of the same reason by which Hungarian notation is stupid and redundant nowadays. In my opinion, you have to stick with the .NET agreement, since it is now widely used. Don't puzzle anyone by refusing this naming agreement. Don't forget that it's a good idea to just remove the I prefix for default interface implementation names. For example, customer inherits from iCustomer. So here we just removed the I prefix. Let's talk a little bit about naming generic types. The most common name for generic types is T. For example, add T item or list of T. You're encouraged to add some valuable suffix if it helps to clarify the meaning of the generic parameter. For example, you also can often face the following type names: T-in, T-out, T-input, T-output, especially when there is a pair of generic parameters. T-in is for input, T-out is for output parameters. Logical. Try to use singular names for enumerations. Here is an example. Device is a good name for an enum. Devices would be a bad name. Use plural names for bit enumerations. Saying bit, I mean decorated by the flags attribute. Here's an example. Keyboard keys. Also, don't add enum as a suffix, like device enum. It's also a bad idea. Use verbs for naming events. Here are some examples. Status changed, error occurred, and so on. Use tenses if they are connected in time events. For example, processing and processed, closing and closed. Strive to not declare your own delegates. Nowadays, there are generic action and func delegates and event handler of T. Don't make constants uppercased. Constants should have only the first letter uppercased. For example, public static int age or public const int max. And don't use any prefixes. The only meaningful prefix you can use is the underscore in private fields. It is useful because fields and method parameters often have the same name, and to easily distinguish them, you can add the underscore sign to the private fields. Don't use any prefixes in other cases.